You know, there comes a moment in your life when you stop in the middle of everything. Your routine, your conversations, your scrolling, your endless reaching, and you suddenly feel a quiet whisper inside you. A question you didn't invite. A question that feels like it has always been waiting for you. What if closure was never the thing you needed? What if the real healing began not with an ending, but with understanding? Because there is a strange truth about the human heart, it rarely breaks from what happens to it, but from the stories it tells itself afterward. You carry wounds not because someone hurt you, but because your mind hasn't stopped touching them, hasn't stopped reopening them, hasn't stopped trying to make sense of a moment that was never meant to be fully explained. And as you listen now, maybe there is a memory rising quietly, something you don't even talk about anymore. Something you've tucked away, like an unfinished sentence. Maybe a goodbye that never came. Maybe a betrayal that never made sense. Maybe a love that ended too abruptly, like a book whose last page was torn out. And you have lived ever since, with this ache for closure, the conversation you should have had, the apology you deserved, the explanation you never received. Strange how your life becomes a museum of incomplete stories, each one framed in the glass of why? And yet, here's the paradox. The very closure you chase is often the thing that keeps you trapped. You believe if you could just know why things happened the way they did, you could finally breathe. But what if closure is not a door that someone else must open for you, but a quiet room you learn to build within yourself? What if closure is not an answer, but an acceptance? What if closure is not the end of something, but the beginning of seeing it clearly? You see, every human heart aches for resolution, for a clean ending, for symmetry, for the kind of emotional punctuation that says, you may now move on. But life, in its infinite wisdom, rarely offers that kind of clarity. Instead, it offers you something much deeper, moments that confuse you, challenge you, awaken you, moments that shatter your illusions and sharpen your awareness. And maybe the deepest truth is this: closure doesn't set you free. Understanding does. Not understanding them, but understanding yourself. Understanding why you hoped the way you did. Why you stayed the way you did. Why you tolerated the way you did. Why you believed the way you did. Because closure tries to fix the past, but understanding transforms the person who lived through it. And as this thought settles in your chest, let me take you somewhere familiar. The ordinary world you wake up in every single day. The world where everyone pretends they've moved on from things they actually still carry. The world of illusions so subtle we mistake them for normalcy. You step into a room full of people at a dinner, a gathering, a priest, workplace, and they look fine. They talk fine. They smile fine. But beneath that thin layer of composure lies 1,000 silent stories of unresolved things, disappointments shoved under busy schedules, heartbreaks disguised as jokes, grudges softened into polite nods, confusion buried under ambition. People don't walk around with closure, they walk around with distractions. They call it healing when really it's just hurrying. They pretend forgetting is the same as understanding. But forgetting is just emotional dust swept under the rug, waiting to rise the moment a memory steps on it. So the illusion continues, everyone acting as though they are whole, while quietly hoping no one notices the cracks. Think of the friend who laughs a little too loudly to hide the loneliness that sits like a ghost beside them. Think of the colleague who buries themselves in work, not because they love productivity, but because silence is too loud. Think of the family member who avoids certain topics because some truths, if spoken, would unravel them. And think of you carrying invisible questions that no one else can see. Questions you don't even articulate because you're afraid they will make you look weak, dramatic, or unfinished. But underneath all of this is the same collective longing. I wish I knew why things happened this way. But life doesn't pause to give explanations. People don't always offer apologies. Some chapters close without warning. Some relationships fade without clarity. Some situations collapse without a single reason you can point to. And so the illusion grows thicker. The illusion that everyone else has healed cleanly. has moved on neatly, has understood gracefully. You compare your inner chaos to their outer calm and wonder what's wrong with you. But what if nothing is wrong with you? What if the only difference is that you are finally seeing the truth? Seeing that most people don't heal by understanding. They heal by avoidance. And avoidance is a fragile foundation. It cracks with time. You begin to notice things others miss. The way someone's eyes shift when they talk about their past. The hesitation in their voice when they say they're over something. The practiced smile when they insist they're fine. You start seeing the world not as a stage of confident performers, but as a quiet sea of unresolved souls, drifting through unfinished emotional stories. And in this awareness, something begins to awaken inside you, not as a judgment, but as a realization. Maybe closure was never meant to be given by others. Maybe it is something you learn to give yourself. This is the beginning of your awakening, the stirring of a deeper consciousness that whispers, "You are not broken for wanting answers." But your healing begins the moment you stop waiting for them. And that is where our journey truly begins. And as this awakening slowly stretches within you, like dawn pulling its first quiet light across the horizon, you begin to notice how deeply the illusion of closure has shaped your life. You start recalling moments you once brushed aside, moments you told yourself didn't matter anymore. But now, in this clearer light, you see how each of those unresolved fragments shaped your behavior, your patterns, the way you guard yourself, the way you let others close or don't. You begin to realize that unresolved moments never disappear. They simply disguise themselves as personality traits. That fear of expressing your feelings, maybe it was born from someone who mocked your vulnerability. That instinct to avoid conflict, perhaps it grew from a moment when speaking up cost you something precious. That habit of over-explaining yourself? It might have come from the times you were misunderstood and never got the chance to defend your truth. You see, you may not remember the discomfort of the past, but your body does. Your heart does. Your behaviors do. But no one ever taught you this. No one ever told you that closure doesn't arrive as a final conversation, a neat explanation, a well-packaged ending. They told you to move on. They told you time would heal. They told you to let go. But how does one let go of something they never understood in the first place? How does one release a story whose meaning remains tangled like a knot at the bottom of the soul? And so life becomes a cycle. You seek answers from people who cannot give them, from moments that will never replay, from memories that echo but never speak. You wait for clarity that will never arrive from the outside. And in this waiting, your life pauses, your heart pauses, your growth pauses. But then there comes a moment, a small, subtle moment, when something shifts. It doesn't come with thunder or revelation. It comes quietly, like breath. You begin to see that closure is not something withheld from you. It is something misunderstood by you. Closure was never meant to come from the person who hurt you, left you, failed you, lied to you, misunderstood you. Closure was never meant to be delivered like a final letter. Closure was meant to arise from understanding. Why it hurt, why it mattered, why it shaped you the way it did. And this understanding does not require them, it requires you. Imagine for a moment, standing in front of the memory that still stings, the one that returns at inconvenient times. Instead of demanding answers from it, imagine asking yourself, what did this moment teach me about myself? What did this show me about my needs, my wounds, my hopes, my boundaries? That question asked sincerely unlocks something. Because understanding is not about making the past make sense. It is about making yourself make sense. And so begins Part 3, The Awakening. It comes not as enlightenment, but as honesty. Not as a grand spiritual moment, but as a tender confrontation with the truth. You start to see the invisible architecture of your emotional world. You start to notice the pattern beneath the pattern. You begin to understand why certain people's words cut deeper than others, why certain endings stayed with you longer than the relationships themselves, why certain silences were louder than the arguments you never had. You begin to see the difference between what happened to you and what you told yourself afterward. And that difference, that space between the event and the meaning, is where you have been hurting. You replay moments not because you need closure, but because your mind is trying to rewrite the meaning of what happened. You think you need them to explain it, but you are the one who has been writing the story all along. And so the awakening deepens. You realize that closure is an external fantasy for an internal problem. You realize the truth you were never taught. The past cannot give you what the present has not learned. And you begin to understand that the person who hurt you may never understand what they did. The person who left may never know what you needed. The person who betrayed you may never feel the weight you carried. And waiting for them to understand is the very thing that has kept you tied to them long after they were gone. But here's the quiet liberation. Your healing does not depend on their understanding. It depends on yours. Understanding does not erase the pain, it explains it. Understanding does not undo the past, it untangles it. Understanding does not remove the scar, it reveals the strength beneath it. And in this awakening, something extraordinary happens. You stop wishing things were different. You stop bargaining with memories. You stop replaying moments, trying to find the missing line. You stop searching for closure from the person who took your peace. Because you see now, the closure you were begging for from others was only ever an invitation to understand yourself more deeply. And once you begin to understand yourself, the grip of the past loosens, not because it is resolved, but because it no longer defines you. The awakening is not loud. It does not announce itself. It arrives quietly, like a truth you always knew, but never had the courage to say aloud. I cannot change what happened, but I can change what it means to me. And in that single shift from seeking answers to seeking understanding, your entire inner world begins to rearrange, not with force, not with closure, but with clarity. And as the awakening deepens, you begin to notice the subtle tremors that accompany true awareness. The small, almost imperceptible shifts that change how you move through the world. You start to recognize the difference between living unconsciously and living consciously, and with it comes a strange mix of relief and tension, of curiosity and unease. Life no longer feels like a smooth, continuous film. It feels like a series of moments stitched together with invisible threads, some taut, some fraying, each carrying its own weight, each asking to be noticed. Suddenly, the things that once seemed trivial, the way someone looked at you, the words left unspoken, the silences that stretched too long begin to carry meaning, and the meaning is not always kind. Sometimes it is unsettling. Sometimes it reveals truths about people, about situations, about yourself, that you were never ready to confront. This is the danger and the beauty of awakening. It shows you the world as it is, not as you wished it would be. And when you see the world as it is, you also see yourself in it more clearly. You see your own patterns, your own fears, your own complicity. You see the moments when you ignored your intuition, the times when you stayed silent to avoid discomfort, the ways you shaped yourself to fit expectations that were never yours to begin with. And with this clarity comes a certain isolation, not the kind of loneliness that can be fixed with a phone call or a night out, but a profound existential solitude. You start to notice that the people around you are still wrapped in illusions. They speak in rehearsed lines. They navigate their lives with invisible scripts. They believe they have healed when they have merely hidden their wounds beneath the noise of daily life. And when you try to explain your insights, to share the understanding that now pulses quietly within you, you discover a subtle truth. Most ears cannot hear what your heart has learned. Most minds cannot grasp what your consciousness now perceives. And in this realization, you feel a separation, a quiet distance from the world you once moved through, as if fully part of it. You may walk into a room full of familiar faces and feel strangely apart, as though you are observing life through a pane of glass that no one else can see. The laughter of others may sound hollow, the conversations trivial, the concerns shallow. And you wonder if this is the price of seeing too clearly, the cost of awakening too early, the loneliness of a consciousness that refuses to settle for illusions. You might meet someone who has suffered deeply, someone whose pain echoes your own, and you recognize a resonance, a connection that cuts deeper than casual friendship. And yet, even in these rare encounters, there is the quiet fear. Will anyone truly understand me? Will anyone truly see the depths that I now see? You realize that understanding others is a gift, but understanding yourself is a responsibility. And when you bear this responsibility fully, you feel the weight of isolation, not as punishment, but as a companion, a reminder that you are living in a space between worlds, the world of ordinary appearances and the world of subtle truth. Sometimes, the isolation feels unbearable. You may lie awake at night, feeling the presence of memories and insights that no one else seems to share, feeling the strange tension of being awake while everyone else sleeps. You notice the gaps in your relationships, the invisible walls that awareness has placed between you and those you love. And yet, within this isolation, there is a strange intimacy with yourself, a new depth that you never experienced before. You learn to converse with your own thoughts, to sit with your emotions, to listen to the echoes of your own heart. And in these moments, the seeds of wisdom begin to grow. But the isolation is not without struggle. You may feel misunderstood, dismissed, even alienated. You may watch people repeat patterns you now see so clearly, unable or unwilling to change, and feel a pang of sorrow or frustration. And in these pangs, you confront the moral tension that will follow you into the next phase of this journey. The tension between knowing and intervening, between observing and speaking, between guiding and respecting the freedom of others. Because once you see too clearly, you can no longer participate blindly in the illusions that sustain the world. You are aware of pain that is ignored, of truths that are silenced, of opportunities for compassion that go unseen. And in this awareness, the heart is both opened and burdened. And so you carry it. The isolation, the clarity, the responsibility, the quiet, unspoken understanding that most will never reach. It is heavy, yes, but it is also real. And in the reality of this weight, you discover that being awake is not a destination, nor a reward, nor a punishment. It is simply the act of noticing, the act of being present, the act of allowing yourself to truly see. And with this seeing comes the inevitability of conflict, not the obvious, dramatic conflict, but the slow, insidious tension that grows between who you are becoming and the world you inhabit. You will want to intervene. You will want to speak. You will want to correct, to comfort, to explain. And yet, you cannot. Not without risking what you cannot yet articulate. Not without disturbing what others are not yet ready to understand. And so you live in a delicate balance, navigating the inner awakening and the outer world, aware that every interaction carries subtle moral weight, that every choice to act or remain silent shapes not just your life, but your consciousness. And within this tension, the isolation stretches further, deeper, touching every corner of your being, until you wonder whether understanding yourself was worth the solitude, whether the truth is always a lonely companion, whether awakening always comes with a price. But then, in quiet moments, you remember that solitude is not emptiness, it is space. Space to observe, space to breathe, space to process, space to finally integrate the lessons the past has been quietly teaching you all along. And slowly, you begin to see that even in isolation, there is a form of connection to your own mind, your own heart, your own awareness, connection to the world, not as it appears on the surface, but as it truly exists in the subtle currents beneath it. You begin to understand that awakening does not alienate you entirely. It aligns you with a deeper rhythm of life, a quieter, truer, more intimate understanding of existence. And in this alignment, though loneliness remains a shadow companion, you begin to recognize the glimmer of something profound, clarity tempered with compassion, awareness balanced by patience, and a deep, quiet knowledge that though few may understand you, You are fully capable of understanding yourself. And then comes the conflict, not the loud, dramatic kind you might expect, but the subtle, internal struggle that gnaws quietly at your heart. You begin to notice moments when your awareness demands action, when your understanding whispers that something could be healed, corrected, guided, yet the world around you moves as though nothing matters. You feel the tug between speaking and remaining silent, between intervening and observing, between expressing the truth and respecting the rhythm of life that cannot yet bend to your clarity. Perhaps you witness someone repeating a pattern that once hurt you, or see another flounder in a situation you now understand so clearly, and a voice rises inside you. You could tell them, you could warn them, you could save them from themselves. But then another voice, quieter yet insistent, counters, or perhaps they must see it for themselves. Perhaps the lesson is theirs, not yours to deliver. Perhaps intervention is just another illusion of control. And so you hesitate, and hesitation feels heavy, a weight you cannot place, a choice you cannot fully own. You see the world through a lens of moral and emotional clarity, but the world is not always ready for that clarity. Your heart aches with the knowledge that awareness cannot always fix what it sees, that understanding does not always translate into change, that wisdom cannot always alter the paths of others. And in this tension, you feel the strain, the conflict between knowing and doing, between compassion and detachment, between the desire to heal and the necessity of letting go. Every decision is a moral landscape, every pause a reflection of your own boundaries, every word unsaid a meditation on restraint. And as this inner conflict unfolds, you begin to sense the fragility of the human spirit, the thin line between engagement and overextension, between care and self-sacrifice, between empathy and exhaustion. It is the conflict of consciousness itself, to feel too much, to know too deeply, to perceive truths others ignore, and yet to navigate a world that moves in ignorance. And the more you see, the heavier the burden becomes. You begin to notice how easily one can drown in the awareness of suffering, in the endless accumulation of stories that cry out for attention. And in this accumulation, the collapse begins. Not a sudden shattering, but a slow unraveling, like a rope fraying under the constant tension of understanding. Your mind, once a calm observer, now trembles under the weight of too many unresolved threads. You replay conversations, memories, injustices, and regrets not because they are unresolved, but because you feel the pull of empathy too strongly. You carry the pain of others as though it were yours, and in doing so, your own emotional reservoir begins to overflow. You notice fatigue not only in your body but in your spirit, the slow depletion that comes from absorbing what cannot always be fixed. Life's illusions crumble, and with each crumbling comes disorientation, a vertigo of consciousness that makes the world feel both painfully vivid and impossibly absurd. Metaphors arise unbidden. You are a candle burning at both ends, a sponge saturated with sorrow, a traveler who sees the map but cannot change the terrain. You feel the pull of emotional gravity, the magnetism of other people's unresolved pain, the endless echo of moments that will never resolve, and you realize that over-awareness is its own form of suffering. And yet, in this collapse, there is clarity, if you can bear to notice it. The collapse is a signal, a message from the self that boundaries are necessary, that compassion must be tempered with self-care, that knowing too much without discernment can consume you. You realize that understanding is not a limitless resource. It is finite, delicate, and must be managed with care. You feel the tension between your desire to see everything, to hold everything, to heal everything, and the inevitable truth that you cannot carry the world alone. You are human, and humans are not designed to bear infinite awareness without consequence. And in this recognition, there is grief, the grief of knowing that some things will remain unresolved, some people will not understand, some pain will persist, some stories will never be told. The collapse is not dramatic, but it is profound. a quiet surrender to the limits of empathy, the boundaries of understanding, the necessity of letting some things exist as they are. And in this surrender, a subtle transformation begins. For the first time, perhaps, you glimpse that the weight you feel is not a failure, but a guide, a signpost, pointing toward balance, toward wisdom tempered with compassion, toward the integration of awareness without self-destruction. The collapse is not the end of awakening. It is a threshold, a boundary that teaches the value of discernment. You learn that overabsorption does not serve anyone, not even those you wish to help. You understand that to truly see, to truly understand, you must sometimes step back, breathe, and allow the currents of life to move without forcing them into resolution. And in that subtle step back, the seeds of revelation begin to grow. You sense that hope is not about fixing everything, that wisdom is not about having all the answers, that healing is not about controlling the world. Hope, wisdom, and healing arrive quietly, as they always have, as they always must, from the understanding that your role in the world is not to carry all its weight, but to navigate it consciously, gently, and with care for both yourself and others. And as this truth settles into your bones, you notice a strange, tender relief. The collapse has shown you your limits, yes, but also your capacity. You see that awareness, when tempered with boundaries, transforms from burden into strength. You feel the quiet beginning of trust in yourself, in your capacity to navigate complexity without losing your essence. And in this liminal space between collapse and clarity, you begin to sense that understanding, true understanding, is not just a tool for seeing, but a refuge for the heart. That even amidst disorientation, even amidst fatigue, even amidst the moral and emotional turbulence, there exists a place where you can anchor yourself, a place where insight becomes peace, awareness becomes compassion, and clarity becomes wisdom. And then comes the revelation, subtle at first, like sunlight filtering through a dense forest, illuminating parts of yourself and the world that had long been hidden in shadow. You begin to understand that the journey you have walked, the awakening, the isolation, the conflict, the collapse, was never meant to break you. It was meant to teach you the delicate art of balance, the quiet mastery of seeing without being consumed, of feeling without being lost. You realize that understanding is not a prize to be won or a secret to be uncovered. It is a way of living, a way of engaging with life that honors both the depth of your awareness and the limits of your humanity. You see that boundaries are not walls but bridges, bridges that allow you to connect deeply without losing yourself, bridges that protect your energy while offering compassion, bridges that let you witness the world fully without absorbing every weight. And in this revelation, you feel something lift. The endless, exhausting striving for closure, the compulsive replaying of moments, the relentless questioning of others' motives. It is not that the past suddenly makes sense, nor that all the wrongs are forgiven. It is that you have discovered a different path, a path where understanding yourself, your own responses, your own needs, becomes enough to transform the way you live. You sense a quiet liberation, not loud or dramatic, but profound in its simplicity. You do not need closure, you need understanding. And with this understanding comes an almost imperceptible shift in how you interact with the world. You see others with gentler eyes, not because you forgive everything, but because you recognize that everyone is navigating their own labyrinth of confusion and pain. You feel compassion not as obligation, but as resonance. You act not from expectation, but from clarity. You realize that your role is not to fix the world, not to force resolutions, not to demand understanding from others, but to cultivate clarity, presence, and wisdom within yourself. And as this wisdom takes root, you begin the slow, delicate process of integration. The lessons of isolation, conflict, and collapse become part of the fabric of your being, not weights you carry, but threads that strengthen your consciousness. You notice a new patience emerging, the patience to let others grow at their own pace, the patience to let the past rest, the patience to hold your own heart tenderly without judgment. You learn to navigate life with both eyes open, aware of the depths, conscious of the currents, but anchored in your own center. And in this integration, the paradox that haunted you at the beginning finally begins to dissolve. You remember the ache for closure, the longing for answers, the hope that someone or something would finally make it all make sense. And now you see clearly. The sense you sought externally was always internal, always within your reach, waiting for the courage to observe, to reflect, to understand. You feel the quiet beauty of life returning, not as a perfect narrative, not as a neatly tied story, but as a living, breathing journey that is messy, uncertain, and infinitely rich. You begin to see endings not as absolutes, but as transitions, beginnings not as guarantees, but as invitations. And you notice that your heart, once heavy with unanswered questions, now carries a calm strength, an equanimity forged in the fires of awareness. You move through the world differently, not because the world has changed, but because your perception has deepened. You notice moments of grace, a stranger's smile, a friend's honesty, a sunset that speaks of impermanence, a silence that teaches presence. You understand that life is not about closure. It is about engagement, reflection, and understanding. You feel the delicate interweaving of your own awareness with the rhythm of existence, a harmony that was always there but invisible to the untrained eye. And in this harmony, you discover the truth that has been whispering to you all along, that suffering, awareness, and clarity are not enemies, but teachers, that the ache for understanding is the path to wisdom, that the moments you thought left you broken were, in truth, the spaces in which your consciousness was expanding. And finally, you rest in the realization that you are enough, not because the world has made sense, not because others have apologized or explained, not because the past has changed, but because you have learned to hold yourself with clarity, compassion, and understanding. You look back at the paradox you began with. Closure is a dream. Understanding is the reality. And you smile quietly, gently, tenderly, knowing that the journey never ends, that life continues to challenge, to surprise, to teach, but that you are no longer adrift. You carry your awareness as a lantern, not a burden, illuminating the path not just for yourself, but for anyone who is ready to see, ready to listen, ready to breathe into the truth that has always been waiting, that you do not need closure, you need understanding. And with this, the story closes, not with an ending, but with a pause, a breath, a reflective exhale that invites you to continue walking, continue noticing, continue engaging, fully alive in the mystery of what is, fully awake to the reality of your own consciousness, fully at peace with the eternal unfolding of life itself.